My name is Laverne Kindree. I was born in Saskatchewan, Delisle, Saskatchewan. I completed my high schooling in Saskatoon. I did my Bachelor of Arts and Sciences in the University of Saskatchewan. Went down to Toronto, completed my medical degree in Toronto, and then came out to Vancouver to do my internship to see if I would like to stay at the coast, which I decided I would. I first heard about Squamish while I was interning in St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. I was looking for a place to practice. I came up before I'd finished my internship, had a look at Squamish, and rather liked what I saw. At that time, Dr. MacDonald was covering the practice here. He was in wood fiber. The previous doctor, Dr. Paul, who had been the original doctor in Squamish, died in 1941 during an air raid alert. He went out to the backyard to put out a fire and had a heart attack and died. And following that time, the practice was covered by Dr. MacDonald and one or two other short-term doctors. It was in the early spring when I came up to have a look at Squamish and decided I would like to come here. And for a few weekends I came up just on the weekend to give them some coverage until I completed my internship in June. And in June I married one of the nurses from St. Paul's. We had a week's honeymoon on the island, and then the second week of our honeymoon we came up to Squamish and set up housekeeping on 3rd Avenue. In those days, there was no road, no railroad. We came up by Union Steamship, which was the method of connecting with the PGE Railway for passenger traffic. There was no hospital, and the offices I shared with a dentist in the back of the old drugstore, which is now H&R Block, the white building on the corner, H&R Block. We set up housekeeping in the house that Dr. Paul had built back in 1935, and set up office practice. Shortly after we came, a committee was struck in the town to see if they could get a hospital. The town was anxious to keep a doctor, having been without one for some time. And some of the prominent names on that committee, Hannah McCormick was the chairman, and I think the driving force in the success of the committee. Jack Castle, Harold Bailey are some of the prominent names that were on that committee. And over the period of the next year or so, they raised $33,000, which at that time and in a small community was a lot of money. We then had the problem of taking that to the provincial government and getting them to agree that we should have a hospital. That was a bit of a drawn-out process. First they said we could. We got architects' plans drawn up, and then we said we couldn't, and we had trips over to Victoria. It got to the stage where we actually went to the Attorney General's department to find out how you go about suing the government for breach of promise.
Not much has changed.
Not much has changed. Anyhow, Ernie Carson was our member in the House at that time, and we visited him just prior to a cabinet meeting, and I was telling him of our problems and pointed out to him that if Vancouver raised the same amount of money for the population, that have raised $9 million. And I said, if they came to the government with $9 million and said, help us build a hospital, I don't think you'd have refused them. He went into the cabinet meeting, and the meeting wasn't going very well. Johnson was the premier at that time, and it was a coalition government, combination of conservatives and liberals. Anyhow, he trotted out this comparison of the effort that the Squamish had put into raising the money for the hospital. And that apparently turned the tide in the cabinet meeting. The premier said, "Oh well, if they've put that much effort into it, we can't let them down." And we did get our hospital, and that was the first hospital. It took 2 years to that stage, and then it took 2 more years during the construction. So from the time Norma and I came here, it was 4 years before we got the hospital. And that was a pretty important day for us. When we had come, we liked the town, but I realized that for a young doctor starting out, to continue practicing indefinitely without a hospital was sort of ending your career before you even started it. And I had made a decision that if we weren't able to get a hospital, I'd have to leave and go someplace where there was a hospital. But if we did get the hospital, I would stay. So, of course, when we got the approval for the hospital, I was committed long-term to stay, because you couldn't have a hospital and then have the doctor pull out. That was 1952, and we had 24 beds, and that's about what we have today, 24 acute beds. We have more extended and intermediate care beds, but the acute care side of the hospital is really no bigger in terms of bed capacity as it was then. A few medical things occurred. One of the first things I ran into was patients with undulant fever, and that's an illness that you get from unpasteurized milk. And the people in the Squamish Valley were drinking unpasteurized milk. They had their own cattle, and they milked them, and they didn't have pasteurizing facilities. So one of the first health problems I had is to go out checking the cattle and trying to find out where this undulant fever was coming from, and that was an interesting sideline in medicine.